Hey comic book fans, with the release of James Gunn's Superman movie this summer and me being the huge Superman fan that I am, I want to do a whole bunch of great Superman related videos leading up to that film's release just to kind of build the hype train up, so to speak. So when I was brainstorming potential video ideas, I knew there was one topic and one topic alone that would be the perfect starting off point for our journey towards the new Superman movie on the big screen. The topic in question is a deep dive into what I consider to be the greatest Superman story of all time, Superman for All Seasons. I wanted to take a look at this story in particular for two reasons. The first is that when James Gunn talks about his upcoming Superman movie, he lists 4 comics in particular that his movie will draw heavy inspiration from. Those comics are All-Star Superman, Whatever Happened to the Man of Tomorrow, Kingdom Come, and you guessed it, Superman for All Seasons. So consider this doing your homework for that film's release. But the second reason I knew I needed to do this topic first is a much more personal one. Superman for All Seasons is my favorite Superman comic of all time, but not just that, it's pretty much my favorite comic of all time, period. Growing up, I was always more of a Batman and Spider-Man fan. I was raised on a healthy diet of Batman the Animated Series, the 60s Batman, and Spider-Man the Animated Series. Sure, I'd watch Justice League or Justice League Unlimited occasionally, but not nearly as often as Batman or Spider-Man. Superman never even factored into the equation at that age. I was aware of his show and I liked the Batman Superman movie. Underrated gem, by the way. But I never had strong feelings about the Man of Steel one way or the other. Fast forward to college and I really started to get into comics and I decided to read this Superman title called For All Seasons. Something about the art style made it impossible for me to put down, but it was how the story portrayed Superman that forever stuck with me and made me finally realize why the character has endured for more than 85 years. Superman for All Seasons was essentially what made me a Superman fan, and it is still to me the quintessential Superman story. With all that said, what exactly is Superman for All Seasons? For All Seasons is a 4-issue limited series from 1998 written by Jeff Loeb with art by Tim Sale, focusing on Superman from the perspective of 4 different characters in his immediate circle across 4 separate seasons of the year. Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale previously worked together in the world of DC when they made Batman The Long Halloween, which is often regarded as one of the best Batman stories of all time. They would reunite again after For All Seasons to write the follow-up to The Long Halloween, Batman Dark Victory, another personal favorite of mine and one that I felt deserved a shout out. For All Seasons acts as a really nice counterpiece to the team's work on The Long Halloween. Whereas The Long Halloween is a well-crafted narrative with intricate details, a compelling mystery, and great twists and turns, For All Seasons' story is pretty straightforward and basic. Not to say basic as a bad thing, it's just a story that hones in on its main character and the personal struggles of doing good. It's also the antithesis of the duo's work in The Long Halloween by how the story is visually presented. The Long Halloween is a dark and bleak story, so it's told through harsh shadows, lots of negative space, angular lines, and sharp contrasts. The art style for The Long Halloween is almost as iconic as the comic itself. On the flip side, For All Seasons is bright, colorful, and is honestly one of the most beautiful comics I have ever seen. The art is really a big selling point of the story because so many pages are just full page spreads or even 2-page full frame shots that are meant to leave the reader in awe. I mean, just look at this! Artist Tim Sale said he didn't take any inspiration from older Superman stories like the Christopher Reeve movies, but instead took heavy inspiration from Norman Rockwell, the classic American painter. Rockwell's work focused on the everyday slice of life Americana, and that absolutely translates to Sale's work on For All Seasons. It's a unique and very classic America look that is simultaneously old school, yet timeless. Smallville is portrayed as the most Norman Rockwellian location to ever grow up in, which contrasts perfectly with Clark's move to Metropolis. But more on Smallville later. However, the secret sauce to the look of For All Seasons was in its colorist Bjarne Hansen. Hansen is a Danish painter that was recruited by Tim Sale to do various background and color work on the book, and it's what makes this story so visually stunning. Sale purposely left a lot of empty space on the page for Hansen to come in, work his magic, and do some truly gorgeous watercoloring. The sunsets somehow look like something both real, yet out of a dream. Even the reflections on this missile just stand out to me and are so unique for the comic book world. The watercolors contrast so well with Sale's line work that it all just pops and complement each other so well. Besides the incredible background work, Superman for All Seasons also has a unique approach to its visual presentation of Clark/Superman. The usual mold for Supes is that classic circus strongman look with muscles upon muscles, the literal model of a superhero. For All Seasons though, because it's such a human story, decides to give Clark a much more human design. Clark is a massive figure, but not in a muscly way, more like a bull in a china shop way. He doesn't have muscles popping out, but instead resembles an offensive lineman in football. Just a big, beefy farmhand, a gentle giant if you will. A guy that is constantly uncomfortable with just how much bigger he is than everyone else, and thus constantly hunches to hide his true size. It's a good visual representation of how much Clark is an outsider to the rest of the world. On the flip side, Superman is still larger than life, but has a design closer to Mr. Incredible than a Mr. Universe. I think this is to make him come across much more approachable. He's not meant to be a big scary presence, but someone that keeps people safe. A protector, more so than a fighter, and for this story, I think it really works. And circling back to the artwork, when Superman does finally arrive, his colors pop. He immediately stands out, and your eyes as a reader are always drawn to him. But enough about the artwork, or I'll ramble about that all day. Let's talk about For All Seasons' story. I said earlier that compared to Loeb and Sale's earlier work with The Long Halloween, For All Seasons has a pretty simple and straightforward story. And while that's true, it's because this is a more personal story that focuses more so on inner conflict than an external force like the Holiday Killer in Long Halloween. It's both an origin story for Superman and not at the same time. It's not because it doesn't hold the audience's hand through the big origin moments we've seen to death, like the destruction of Krypton and the Kents finding Clark. But it is an origin story in the sense that it shows the world Clark grew up in and how Smallville shaped him into the hero that he would someday be. If that basic premise sounds at all familiar, it should. Alfred Goff and Miles Millar cite Superman for All Seasons as the inspiration for their beloved show debuting in 2001, Smallville. In fact, Jeff Loeb was even an executive producer on that show for 3 seasons and wrote 4 episodes for the show. And just a fun little Easter egg, the Kent family does actually have a dog in For All Seasons, not named Crypto though, but Shelby. So when the Kents got a dog in Smallville, naturally, its name was also Shelby. So basically, Superman For All Seasons is Smallville before Smallville. The story is very Clark-focused, centering around a guy just trying to do good in a world that makes it incredibly difficult to do so. Clark constantly wants to do good and help others, but even he can't always save everyone, so seeing him grapple with that makes for a compelling character. There's a major story beat where a huge storm hits Smallville, and Clark works all night helping the townsfolk, and despite all his hard work, all he can say when it's over is, "I could have done more." That to me is Superman in a nutshell, constantly trying to do good, no matter the odds, and always asking how he can help. For All Seasons also has lots of moments of loneliness and isolation that gets the reader to sympathize with Clark. When he's growing up in Smallville, Martha and Jonathan Kent talk about how different he is. The comic then has a beautiful, yet sad panel that shows Clark all alone in his room, having heard everything with his super hearing. We get an echo of that moment in the Lois Lane section later when she touts the accomplishments of Superman and how he must be so loved by so many people, only for the panel to again reveal Clark alone in his apartment. But the comic is never overly melancholy or dour. Clark isn't shown to be some overly mopey and depressed guy that constantly has the weight of the world on his shoulders. He's just a regular guy that has the same problems as the rest of us, just on a much larger scale. That isolation is even how Lex Luthor decides to take down Superman in his attempt to reassert himself as Metropolis's grand savior. Quick side note, I love that the tone of Superman For All Seasons is a throwback story, so in keeping with that, the creative team decided to give Lex his red hair, yet he's still balding. Just a nice little design choice for Luthor. But Lex, being the evil genius he is, uses society's fear of the unknown against Superman as he creates an unknown virus to incapacitate the city, yet holds Superman responsible because, "You're an alien, how do we know this virus didn't come from you?" Superman is the only one not affected by it, making him truly alone and at the mercy of Luthor for a solution. Lex naturally has a solution up his sleeve, but doesn't give Superman the whole picture that the answer will come at the cost of a human life. Having been defeated mentally and emotionally, Clark has no choice but to retreat back to Smallville with his tail between his legs. It's a refreshing change of pace to see Superman get knocked down not physically, but mentally, like Lex had literally ripped the hope out of Superman. To me, this is where the story becomes its most human. As a character, Clark grew up thinking the world was one thing, only to grow up and see that the real world was nothing like how he had imagined it. In the words of Rocky Balboa, the world ain't all sunshine and rainbows. It's a very mean and nasty place, and I don't care how tough you are, it will beat you to your knees and keep you there permanently if you let it. It's easy to become jaded and cynical with the world. I'm absolutely guilty of it myself. But the world doesn't need more cynicism. It needs more hope. That's what makes Superman special. He doesn't see the world as it is. He sees the world as it could be. And I just think that's pretty cool and something to emulate. With Clark back in Smallville, he takes the time to find himself again and rediscover why he does what he does, just without the Lex Luthor microscope. He gets to help the townspeople again and remembers why he does good to begin with. Because it's the right thing to do. Because no matter how many times he gets knocked down by Luthor, or Bizarro, or Doomsday, Superman always gets back up. Clark Kent always gets back up. After some words of affirmation from his parents and childhood friend Lana Lang, Clark leaves once again for Metropolis to be the Superman the world needs, even when the going gets tough. As he leaves, Lana says the line that is Superman for all seasons, boiled down to one sentence. Because to understand that man in the cape who could fly, all I needed to know was Clark. I know some people will have the criticism that Superman is boring or too overpowered, but for me, I'll just never see it that way because of For All Seasons. Superman is such a rich character because of his humanity, his compassion, and his persistent optimism. As I get older, I love Superman more and more because I just appreciate a character that sees the good no matter what and wants to help because it's the right thing to do. For me, that love and appreciation of Superman started with For All Seasons, and it will always be the quintessential Superman story, highlighting the best of the character. So whether you love Superman or you hate Superman, For All Seasons should be a must-read for any comic book fan, or anyone just looking for a little bit of hope. Well, what do you guys think? Have you guys read Superman For All Seasons? Have you not? Are you interested in this comic? What's your all-time favorite Superman comic of all time? What's your favorite Superman story of all time? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below. I always like hearing from you guys. And if you like what you see and you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, movie guys and gals. Hey, movie fans. A popular debate among nerd circles is the topic of what's the best Batman movie of all time. The character has seen constant reinvention over the years, with each version focusing on different aspects of the character. Some people love the gothic style and tone of the Tim Burton movies, some people love the gritty realism and villains of the Nolan films, while others love the detective story and dark brooding of the Pattinson version. But for me, the best Batman movie of all time combines all of those elements into one definitive Batman experience. Batman: Mask of the Phantasm. Released in theaters on Christmas Day 1993, the film was a spin-off to the incredibly popular Batman the Animated Series that debuted on Cartoon Network in 1992. Originally, the movie was set to be a straight-to-video release, but during production, Warner Bros. Made the decision to put the movie in theaters instead. Except, Warner Bros. Didn't want to put forward the money to properly advertise for the movie for its Christmas release, resulting in the movie flopping at the box office, making a worldwide gross of $5.8 million, losing out to movies like The Pelican Brief, Tombstone, and Mrs. Doubtfire. Sadly, Warner Bros. Would not learn their lesson about failing to market an incredible hand-drawn animated movie, as they would make the same mistake 6 years later with another box office flop turned cult classic, in The Iron Giant. I bring up The Iron Giant because my discovery of both The Iron Giant and Mask of the Phantasm as a kid follows the exact same path. I, like a lot of people apparently, didn't see either movie in theaters, but I'm gonna give myself a pass on Mask of the Phantasm because I was only a few months old at that point. However, I saw Mask of the Phantasm and Iron Giant replayed time and time again on Cartoon Network. It was almost like WB was saying, yeah, we know we screwed up theatrically, now watch it on TV and please go out and buy the DVD. But I feel like Mask of the Phantasm played on TV all the time, especially during Halloween season, given its darker tone. Between Mask of the Phantasm and Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island, Cartoon Network during Halloween was fantastic. But whether I realized it or not, both Phantasm and Zombie Island would end up laying the groundwork for my love of not one, but two genres I talk a lot about on this channel: mystery and horror. Batman Mask of the Phantasm is basically a murder mystery where a new character named the Phantasm comes to Gotham and starts knocking off members of the mob. All the while, Batman is getting blamed for the crimes due to the two characters' very similar appearances, and as the story progresses, we learn that it's more than just the costumes that make Phantasm and Batman very similar. Like any good mystery, the story presents several believable suspects as to who could be behind the mask, while also throwing in a few fun twists and red herrings that we'll talk more about once we get into spoilers. Design-wise, the Phantasm itself is pretty much perfect to me. It's a basic design with not a ton of detail, but boy do you remember everything about it. It almost has hints of a horror movie villain, as you've got an iconic mask and weapon combo, something along the lines of Michael Myers and a kitchen knife or Jason Voorhees and his machete. The Phantasm absolutely creeped me out as a kid, looking like a cross between Casey Jones from the Ninja Turtles and the Ghost of Christmas Future. Isn't that right, Joker?
He looks more like the Ghost of Christmas Future.
But the thing that's forever stuck with me the most about the character is the Phantasm's voice.
Your angel of death awaits.
Literal goosebumps every single time. It wasn't until I got much older and rewatched the movie now that I realized just how cool what they do with the Phantasm's voice really is, but again, we'll circle back to that when we talk about spoilers. Since Mask of the Phantasm exists in the same world as Batman the Animated Series, that show's voice cast returns for this, so you know it's going to be a home run from the voice talent. As any child of the 90s will tell you, Kevin Conroy is Batman. From the animated series to the Arkham games and beyond, Kevin Conroy will forever be my favorite Batman and the voice I hear in my head when reading the comics. And as great as he is as Batman across the board, I think this is his best turn as both Batman and Bruce Wayne. There's a lot of emotional weight that's put on Bruce Wayne in this movie, and Conroy makes you feel the weight every time.
Please, I need it to be different now. I didn't count on being happy.
There's little nuances that Conroy brings, little details that I absolutely love. Case in point, when he first meets Andrea Beaumont, a new character introduced for this movie, he's talking about a promise he made to his parents, and he subtly slips into Batman voice mid-conversation.
Have you kept your vow?
So far.
And since we have Conroy as Batman, we also get Mark Hamill returning as the Joker. And just like how this is the best Conroy has ever been as Batman, this is the strongest Hamill has ever been as the Joker. He is clearly having so much fun being the absolute wild card of the movie. He brings a fun, chaotic energy, but absolutely flips the switch into something terrifying and menacing in a split second.
That's what I want to see. A nice big smile.
Which brings us to our third major player in this story, Andrea Beaumont, voiced by Dana Delaney, who actually voiced Lois Lane in a bunch of projects in this DC animated universe. Andrea Beaumont, however, was a completely new character created for this movie along with her father, Carl Beaumont. Andrea is an early love interest to Bruce Wayne that, as the story progresses, becomes more and more of a fascinating contrast to Bruce. But early on, the two have a happy, healthy relationship with the prospect of it being a lifelong relationship, with the couple openly discussing marriage. As they explore a world showcase, an idyllic futuristic model of what the world could be in the future, they themselves are a model couple. They are that romanticized version of the future that is bright, happy, and good. But even in this idea of a perfect future, Bruce can't help but to think about his promise. Batman Mask of the Phantasm also explores a facet of Batman I don't think we get enough in movies. His origin. No, not that part of the origin. We literally never need to see his parents get shot in Crime Alley in a movie ever again. No, what I mean for origin is everything after Crime Alley. What happened to Bruce Wayne to make him Batman after his parents died? What steps did he take to get to that point? What was his thought process? Was there trial and error on some things? Could he have taken a different path at any point in his life? Could he have been happy? Those are the big questions that Mask of the Phantasm asks, and I think those are such fascinating directions to take. It's interesting watching Bruce struggle with genuine happiness. Like, he feels guilty that Andrea makes him happy and makes him actually want to move on from his pain.
Just doesn't hurt so bad anymore.
It's a new conflict for the ever-brooding character that's a fresh direction for Bruce, and seeing an ever-sure character struggle with uncertainty makes him that much more relatable.
Don't know. I just don't know!
Eventually, Bruce makes the choice to be happy and proposes to Andrea, who gladly accepts and can't wait to tell her father. But because the universe or destiny had other things in mind for Bruce, the engagement is called off abruptly with no real reason given, leaving Bruce just as alone as he was as a child in that alley, with no ray of hope to bring him back. Bruce turns his back to happiness, turns his back to the light, to embrace the shadows. What follows is by far the most epic first suiting up scene of any Batman movie, and probably of any comic book movie, period. Bruce is standing completely in the shadows, and we never get a clear shot of him because from this point forward, Bruce Wayne is gone, and only the shadows remain. Only Batman remains. Even Alfred, who has known Bruce his entire life, can't hide his shock and fear at what stands before him. The music by Shirley Walker, which has been stellar the entire film, crescendos here in the most spectacular fashion. It's truly epic, but not epic in a heroic sense. It's played like an epic tragedy because that's what Batman is. A tragic character. Yeah, he's super cool and all, but he's a character built out of pain and loss who could have had his whole life play out differently if just a few things had changed. With a greater understanding and sympathy for our hero, we cut back to his antithesis and the main driving force of the movie, the Phantasm. Having already taken out the mobster Chucky Saul, the mysterious Angel of Death stalks their next victim in Buzz Bronski. What follows is a scene that lived in my childhood brain rent-free for years. Taking place in a graveyard, this is basically a full-on horror movie scene. I wasn't the horror fan that I am today as a child, so this scene absolutely terrified me. The atmosphere is moody and tense, with a masked killer toying with their prey. It's a classic horror movie chase scene as you can get, even getting a memorable kill from the Phantasm, albeit off-screen to maintain that ever-important PG rating. Although for a PG movie, the movie isn't afraid to show its characters battered and bloodied. Both Joker and Batman have more than their fair share of scrapes, cuts, and busted lips in this movie. The final fight between the two actually reminds me a little of the first Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie, when Spidey fights Green Goblin. Both of those fights had a visceral energy to them and moments that made me actually wince and feel the characters were doing damage to each other. The other big moment in the film where Batman really gets knocked on his butt, though, to a level that we don't really see in any other Batman movie, is at around 2/3 of the way through the movie. Phantasm goes to kill again, only to find out that Joker has beaten them to it. Batman chases the Phantasm and winds up being chased himself by the Gotham PD. But unlike some other Batman chase scenes, like the one in Batman Begins or The Dark Knight Rises, Batman is in legitimate danger the entire time, to a level we rarely see from the Caped Crusader. Bloodied and battered, he only survives and manages to escape because of a conveniently timed arrival by Andrea Beaumont. It's a refreshing change of pace seeing Batman so vulnerable and so exposed. At the end of the day, Bruce is still flesh and blood, just a broken and damaged individual. So from here on out, we're going to dive into the final third of the movie, so I'm just going to throw up the old spoiler warning in case you haven't seen this 30-year-old movie and don't want it spoiled for you, because again, I cannot recommend this movie enough if you haven't already seen it. With Andrea saving Bruce and taking him back to Wayne Manor, the two seem to be working on patching things up and choosing each other again. It seems like despite all the pain and all the loss in Batman's life so far, the door to happiness isn't closed just yet. there's still a chance. Andrea leaves to go take care of some business, but when she leaves, Bruce starts to put some pieces together on this big Phantasm mystery. We finally get our big exposition dump, our big reveal, among many other reveals, is that surprise, surprise, Andrea Beaumont is in fact the Phantasm. So, as much as I love this movie, and it's one of my all-time favorites, I do have a slight nitpick with the finale here. I think the reveal of the Phantasm falls a little flat. The movie basically shows Andrea as the Phantasm without the mask, followed by the big explanation of what happened. Then her as the Phantasm in the full getup in front of the Joker, who immediately calls her out on it.
I'm impressed, lady.
Then this lady goes,
So you figured it out.
like, yeah, you literally just showed us everything right before this reveal. Just move a few things around sequentially and it works a whole lot better as a big payoff to this big epic mystery you've been building. Because up until that point, they were doing some really good hints and teases about who could be the Phantasm. But what I like even more is that the movie goes out of its way to give the audience red herrings about the Phantasm's identity. In the few lines the Phantasm does have in the movie, it's the same voice actor as Carl Beaumont, Andrea's father.
Joker, your angel of death awaits.
But all the money in the world means little if you don't have loved ones to share it with.
Super nitpicky things aside, what exactly is the Phantasm's deal? What is the bigger picture at play here? It's revealed that Andrea's father owed a bunch of money to several dangerous mobsters, and instead of paying them back, her father fled in the middle of the night along with Andrea, which is why it seemed like she abandoned Bruce right before they were set to get married. Sadly, the mob found Andrea's father and sent someone to kill him. So out of revenge, Andrea returned to Gotham under the guise of the Phantasm to take out the mobsters that had her father killed. And now she's here to kill the last one. The one that actually killed her father. The Joker. It's a brilliant way to weave Joker seamlessly into the story while never fully committing to an origin of some kind to Joker, which I always think is a bad idea. Andrea being revealed as the Phantasm truly brings the story full circle and highlights the parallels between her and Bruce. The Phantasm is a dark reflection of Batman, both in costume, but more importantly in what he could have been. Both characters are ones so destroyed by grief and trauma at the loss of a parent or parents that they only see the mission ahead of them, and not what they could have had if they chose a different path. Batman pleads with Andrea when the movie hits us with one of the best exchanges in the entire film.
What will vengeance solve?
If anyone knows the answer to that, Bruce, it's you.
It's a moment that I feel like Robert Pattinson's Batman movie would repeat to a certain degree in its climax when Batman beats down one of Riddler's thugs who calls themselves Vengeance.
I'm vengeance.
Both times, it's the character being faced with the harsh reality of what unchecked vengeance can actually do. At this point, Joker's explosives that he had set up start going off, and he unleashes what I can only describe as the single greatest Joker laugh of all time. Our three main players are now in the middle of absolute chaos, but my favorite detail is where they all are. The big, epic finale is at the same World's Fair Bruce and Andrea were at when the world was still bright and optimistic and happiness still laid before them. Now the fair, which had been abandoned for years, is now going up in smoke, being destroyed by the actions of a madman. Just like how the World's Fair was a metaphor for Bruce and Andrea's earlier relationship, one that represents all the good things that could happen, it now represents what their relationship has become. Neglected over time with no hope of ever coming back, it's now up in flames at the hands of the Joker, the catalyst of its destruction. Andrea takes Joker, and the two are presumed to have died in the fire as Batman is cast down into the sewers. We find him back in the Batcave being comforted by Alfred. I'm actually really glad this scene is in here as it allows Alfred a chance to shine because at the end of the day, I think Alfred is the reason Bruce is the way he is. The Phantasm and Batman are so similar, but Bruce had a support system, a moral anchor that could keep him tethered and keep him from falling into the abyss. Alfred fully acknowledges that he worries Batman gets dangerously close to becoming the very thing he fights every night, but he thanks heaven that hasn't happened yet. It's a sweet moment that shows just how significant Alfred is in the larger Batman mythos. Even when life continues to knock Batman down, Alfred is always there to pick him back up. We find out Andrea has somehow survived and looks to be leaving Gotham and all the painful memories behind. She tells a stranger that she's all alone now. The movie then throws in one last parallel between our two characters as it pans over to reveal Batman standing atop a building, also all alone. But whereas Andrea's mission is done, Batman's story and his mission are never done. The bat signal lights up and the music swells. Batman swings down in epic fashion to answer the call, to fight another day, to continue to fulfill his promise. It's not a big, heroic, epic ending, but one in keeping with the rest of the film's emphasis on tragedy. Batman didn't save the day. He didn't stop the villain. When you really get down to it, Batman fails in this movie. I will forever applaud Mask of the Phantasm for actually showing Batman as the flawed, broken hero he is. But that's what makes Batman special. He's the great tragic figure that is defined by his pain, but doesn't let that pain become him. No matter how much the world throws at him, no matter how much pain and loss Bruce suffers, Batman endures. He is vengeance. He is the night. He is Batman.
Hey comic book fans, so about 2 years ago I gave you my grand review / retrospective of Smallville, and ever since I did that video I have been dying to do a review on Superman and Lois, one of my favorite TV shows of all time. But I wanted to wait until that show was actually 100% done because, you know, there's plenty of times that a CW show will start good and then end up being a CW show. So I wanted to do it now that the show has finally wrapped up earlier this year with season 4, its 4th and final season, and maybe saved its best for last actually. So we're gonna break it all down. We're gonna do the exact same thing that I did with the Smallville video. I'll give you a brief little intro of the show, as well as my history and interaction with the show, the best things about the show, what I thought were some of the weaker aspects of the show, the best episodes, and we'll round it out by talking about the best moments from Superman and Lois. But before we get into all that, what are your thoughts on Superman and Lois? Did you like it? Did you not? Did you check it out? Have you never heard of it? And also, I gotta give the warning now, we're gonna go into full spoilers in order to talk about the goods and the bads of this show. Talking no holds barred here. With all that out of the way, let's talk Superman and Lois. So this show debuted officially in 2021, and it's interesting because I was watching Smallville at the exact same time as this, like watching it for the first time, not really having any knowledge of Smallville. I came into it much later. Heather and I were watching Smallville while new episodes of Superman and Lois were happening. We didn't know it at the time, but it was a fun parallel because Smallville is the origin and leading up to Clark becoming Superman, and Superman and Lois is the twilight years of Superman. Not necessarily his prime, but it's after the prime of what happens in an era of Superman that we don't tell stories about as much. But I was not necessarily looking forward to it, just seeing the little clips. I was like, I think Tyler has potential as Superman, but they're not doing him any favors on Supergirl here. Then I heard that the basic premise of the show is that Superman and Lois have moved back to Smallville with their twin sons, which I was raising an eyebrow to that, going, that's so interesting premise. Plus, it was going to be on the CW, which is, you know, not known for its high production quality, and I do not fault the writers at all. I know they have small budget to work with, but yeah, sometimes it doesn't always look the best or written the best. So I went in with a lot of caution. What ended up happening though is I saw the first 5 minutes of the pilot episode and I never looked back. That first 5 minutes of the show is some of the best Superman material I have ever seen in live action form. It cuts straight to the heart of what makes Superman so special and immediately got me locked into the rest of the show. It's so well done. I still just go back to that opening scene time and time again going, wow, They get it. They get it. Let's talk about some of the big positives here. First and foremost, Tyler Hoechlin is Superman. I didn't know how it would be coming off the heels of what I didn't necessarily love is his portrayal in Supergirl. But Superman and Lois, after the first season alone, I'm going, this is my favorite version of Superman in live action form. Yeah, Christopher Reeve is great. Henry Cavill has had some great moments. But Tyler Hoechlin is what I've been looking for in a Superman for a very long time. In an old interview, an interviewer once asked Christopher Reeve, what is Superman to people? And without hesitation, he said, a friend. And that is exactly what Tyler Hoechlin's Superman comes across as. He seems like a person that you would know. He's a kind soul. He's a friend. He's that type of person that anyone goes to. They know this person. They're friends with this person. That's what Superman is supposed to be. He is Clark first and foremost, and this show focuses on both the Clark and the Superman side of things, but it's his relationship to other people. That's always been the strong suit of Superman. He has friends. He has family. He's a good-hearted person that you just like to be around. He's a huge dork. That is an element of Clark that I have been sorely missing in recent Superman media. But now, between this and My Adventures of Superman, we're getting dorky, nerdy Clark again. And that makes me very, very happy. That's an aspect of the character that I just really, really love. Because at the end of the day, he's a goofy, awkward farm boy. That's what Clark is, and I love him for it. And on a much more personal note, Heather and I earlier this year actually went to our first convention in Orlando here, and we're just like, I'm going first and foremost because Tyler Hoechlin is there, and I wanted to see him just say how great of a Superman he was. It was our first actual photo op we'd ever done with a celebrity, and guys, I was so happy to know that he is just as cool in real life as he is on the screen. He was so pleasant. They're shuttling you super fast for any photo ops in any conventions, but he really made sure to take the time with every single person taking a picture to make them feel special. He made eye contact with us, shook hands, genuinely seemed happy to meet us and have this interaction with us. It just warmed my heart. It made my day going, okay, I'm glad that he knows that being Superman is not just an on-screen thing. It kind of stays with you forever. That was a burden that followed Christopher Reeve. It follows Henry Cavill still to this day. This expectation that you are a good person off screen as well. But the show is only as good as its supporting cast besides just Superman. And the supporting cast, for the most part, is really, really good. Elizabeth Tulloch kind of took a little bit to grow on me as Lois Lane just because I really, really liked Erica Durance from Smallville as Lois Lane. But over time, I'm going, okay, I get what they're going for this version of Lois, and I really, really like it. This show is called Superman and Lois for a reason. It's the pair of them. It's the family dynamic. How does the pair of them between Clark and Lois interact with both their kids? I was very hesitant about the whole twins angle because in the comics, you really just have Jonathan. Jordan's not really a thing, so I was kind of wondering about Jordan, but I liked both of them. They're really, really strong, and I like that they didn't manufacture drama between the family or between the boys. A lot of the interactions just genuinely felt like a family. The brothers weren't constantly at each other's throats, no more than just regular brothers. They seemed like actual friends. I get tired of the infighting in families and dramas just for the sake of it. They felt like an actual family unit, and which is just refreshing to see. Another thing that I was very pleasantly surprised by with Superman and Lois is Dan Romer's exceptional score throughout all 4 seasons of the show. It is hard to have a Superman theme that's not just the John Williams music. I actually really, really enjoy what Hans Zimmer did with Man of Steel. I thought he crushed it, but a lot of the times people fall back on, well, we just use the John Williams because that's the Superman theme. Even Smallville kind of did that to a certain extent. But Superman and Lois never falls into that trap. They 100% commit to fresh and original music that still has that Superman feel to it. It's powerful. It's emotionally stirring. It has great buildup. Whenever I hear the horns in the Superman and Lois theme, I just sink back into that happy place. The music is so powerful and so well done. I also love that this show was clearly made by people that love Superman. There's so many little Easter eggs and references that you would not get unless you were a die-hard fan of Superman. There is a lot of Superman For All Seasons references throughout this show, which just makes my heart happy because it's my favorite comic of all time. You have Superman and Lois founding the For All Seasons charity in the finale, which is a nice little touch that I definitely missed on my first watch. You have one of my favorite scenes in comic book history of Superman saves the little kid, and he goes, "Oh, cool costume. Thanks. My mom made it for me." That moment alone sold me on all of Superman and Lois. But then they take little Easter eggs and references from all previous Superman medium and meld it into one and make it still believable. There is references to both Zack Snyder's Justice League and Superman 3 with Richard Pryor in the show, and both of them make sense. The finale recreates that slow-mo shot from when Steppenwolf is fighting Superman, and it works there. That one's a little obvious. But the one that I'm like, wait a second, are you doing what I think you're doing? Is they more or less lift the freezing a lake to defuse a nuclear power plant or a fire or whatever's happening here from Superman 3 with Richard Pryor, which is not necessarily a beloved Superman outing. It's not a very good movie, but the fact that they're sprinkling these little Easter eggs going, Superman fans will recognize this. And as a fan, I felt rewarded for it. It has good storytelling because they know the source material. They're going, okay, here's what people know about Superman. We're going to tweak it. We're going to play with it. It's still going to be what you know and love, but we're going to change things up a little bit. And that's one of the things that I really, really absolutely loved about Superman and Lois is here's the canon that you know and love, but we're going to change things. We're going to get to the way that you know it eventually, but we're gonna take you on a journey to get there. Like case in point, the first episode, we meet a stranger that we think is Lex Luthor. We're going, oh, interesting, this guy comes in a suit of armor and it's Lex. If they chose to go that route, it would still make a lot of sense, but it's only revealed a few episodes later that that's John Henry Irons. I'm going, oh, that was a cool subversion of expectation, but it still lines up with what we know in the previously established comics. Or the Bizarro/Doomsday twist. When Bizarro shows up in the beginning of season 2, I'm going, oh, that's a choice because it looks like we're running into Doomsday already in only the second season. But we find out it's not Doomsday, it's Bizarro. I'm going, oh, okay, so we're changing things up a little bit. Only for Lex to take Bizarro and kill him over and over and over again to the point that he becomes Doomsday. A big part of Doomsday's origin in the comics is dying repeatedly, and he can't be killed the same way again twice. They basically did copy what they did in the comics, except just took a long way to get there, and it was a cool subversion of expectations going, oh, okay, I thought I knew where this was going. And that's one of the best things about this show is you think you know where it's going. Case in point, the final season, they really teed up the fact that this would be the death of Superman's story arc, and I thought I knew where it was going. But there were so many twists and turns in the path that when we finally get to the end of it, I'm going, oh, this is not where I thought we'd end up at all. This is so much better than anything that I could have imagined. I should have trusted the writers here. They take the viewer on a journey, and that's all I could ever ask from a good storyteller. And I absolutely love, for the most part, stuff that they do on Superman and Lois. And like I said earlier, I did not watch Superman and Lois or Smallville by myself. I had my wonderful wife Heather watching along with me through the entire journey, so she wanted to chime in and give her own unique takes on what made this show so incredibly special.
I really enjoyed Superman and Lois. It was an awesome series to watch with Nathan, and here are some things why I think you should watch it too. This series is really easy to enjoy whether you've seen any material of Superman or any of the characters. It's easy to catch up on or learn more about. It's a great family show. Again, it's not all about, Superman and the villains and just the characters involved. You can enjoy it just as it is as a family show. I love the characters. Their characters are very well written, especially Tyler Hoechlin's Superman. If you know anything about how Clark is and how Superman is as two different identities, I'm not sure if he had any background knowledge before going into this series or prior experience with Superman, but he just has this confidence but not cockiness about him. It makes you curious to know, if you're not familiar, I want to know more about Superman. I want to know about his character. I want to know why he wants to help people and why he wants to serve his community and the world and all that. He's just a really good portrayal of who Superman and Clark Kent are. So I have seen Tyler Hoechlin in many things beforehand, and just the way he portrays his characters in general are very genuine and very real. I think he does this on purpose. For example, I grew up watching Seventh Heaven, and he wasn't in like the early seasons. He was in later seasons, but as he came along, he was pretty young, but he was a believable actor. He was trying to be this all around like good character or good guy, good teenager. He wanted to be helpful. He just portrayed that role very well. I really believe that this series is for anybody. There are a lot of themes and a lot of topics discussed that anyone can relate to. There are things about family drama, action scenes, whether Superman is fighting or saving other people's lives. He does a lot with his family, and he is always there for his sons. They're as teenagers. He is just a good role model. You can see how whether they were at home taking care of his family, taking care of his wife when she was going through a lot, and also just his community. The show showcased Smallville like no other. It was such a good representation of small town and just how everyone can work together as a community. It's just something I really feel like anyone could get something out of. It made me happy. I know there were times where I felt like I was gonna just tear up because it's like, it was very emotional, or there were some like, oh my gosh, like when there were some crazy scenes with some fights or some like moments that you're like on the edge of like, what's gonna happen next, especially if there's gonna be a next episode and you're like, oh, we had to wait for it. It was always fun and exciting, and it's really, there's a good variety that anyone could pick something out that they like from it.
However, as much as I like Superman and Lois, it isn't without its fault. So let's go into some of my negatives for the show. First and foremost, as much as I love Superman and Lois and the twins as the main characters of the show, can't always say the same about the supporting cast. Case in point, the Cushings. I didn't hate the Cushings, but by and large, I never really cared to see them on my screen either. You got like Lana, and Chrissy was roped in at some point, especially in the later seasons, but most importantly, Kyle. I never cared to see Kyle on my screen. I didn't dislike the character, but I just was never emotionally attached or interested in any of his storylines. And it's not a credit or disservice at all to the actor. I think he was doing his absolute best with given his circumstances, given the material he had to work with. It just constantly felt like filler, like we have to have a B plot in here somewhere. I kept holding out hope that I would be emotionally attached to them at some point, but it just never happened. They were just there. I always kind of wanted to fast forward to the next Kent related scene. When it comes to any comic book adaptation, the superhero is only as good as its supervillain, and I think at times Superman and Lois kind of struggles with its villains. Morgan Edge was not necessarily the most compelling villain to me, or when they revealed him to be Tal-Rho, I was like, it's fine. Not necessarily the most interesting. Allie Alston in season 2 was even worse. I thought she was a very unmemorable villain. I don't think it's until we get to Bruno Mannheim in season 3 and get some Bizarro a little bit in season 2 that we actually have somewhat decent villains. But the show focuses so much on its hero that I wish that the villain situation was a little better. Earlier I mentioned that this show was spun out of Supergirl, and I'm still kind of curious if that's the case or not. Case in point, I asked constantly, is this in the Arrowverse or not? So the universe it spawned, Arrow, The Flash, Black Lightning, Supergirl, all of those shows, is this connected to it or not? Because even the show, it felt like, couldn't make up its mind. You had Diggle, the perennial fan favorite from Arrow, in the show a few times. It wasn't like a one-off. He was on the show a few times, which makes me go, oh, okay, so this is connected to the Arrowverse. But there's never a mention of Supergirl. Not that she has to show up, but it's kind of weird that you don't. But the big one that made me go, wait, hold up. Is this Arrowverse or not? Is you had Tom Cavanaugh, most famously for being Reverse Flash in the Flash TV show, show up in the 4th and final season of Superman and Lois, not as Reverse Flash, but as TV personality G. Gordon Godfrey, which, don't get me wrong, cool seeing G. Gordon Godfrey. I like that character. He's obnoxious. He's entertaining, like, D-level comic book character that I always like seeing that Easter egg in there. But you could have gone with any actor. Why did you have to go with Tom Cavanaugh? That just really muddies the water here, going, is this in the Arrowverse or not? It felt like the universe didn't want to commit one way or the other. Lastly, for my negatives, I don't want to hold it against the show, but it is the big gripe that I had, and it is the final season is incredibly rushed. It is not the writers or the actors' fault. It's just that the show got cut. They're lucky to even have had a 4th season. It's also supposed to have 7 seasons worth of content, not 4, and it really showed in the final season. A lot of things got so sped up. The 4th and final season is the death of Superman, but that happens over the span of maybe 3 episodes, and it's so rushed. Lex Luthor only really becomes the Lex Luthor that we know and hate in the final 2 episodes. Jonathan finally gets his powers, almost out of nowhere, because the plot demanded it, almost. There's a lot of stuff that I can see if we got the full 7 seasons, them stretching it out to make more sense, but we just didn't get that. So a lot of stuff had to be really sped up in the 4th and final season, and you just tell. It doesn't flow as smoothly as the first 3. I feel for the creative team. I understand that they had less to work with for their final season. Now, because I love so much of the show, it's actually kind of hard for me to nail down my favorite episodes, but when I really put my nose to the grindstone, I was able to come up with 3 episodes that for me always stood out. I'm going, okay, if I need to show someone this is what makes Superman and Lois special, these are the 3 episodes I would go with. It would be the pilot from season 1, the very first episode they ever showed. The first 5 to 10 minutes, if you can get on board with that and you really like that, I think you'll be locked in for the rest of the show. But the whole pilot establishes everything so perfectly. It sets up John Henry, it sets up the twins, but I think the best episode in season 1 was episode 11, more or less the flashback episode. This is classic Superman that I know we will never get, but I love it anyway. It almost harkens back to like the Max Fleischer cartoon era of Superman, a homemade suit that looks a little cheesy, but I love it so much. And seeing Lois and Superman's first interactions when she's interviewing him on the TV, and that is one of my favorite scenes of all time, of him speaking all these different languages, and she's like, is that a superpower? And he's like, no, just a general interest in the world. And she's like, how many languages do you speak? All of them. Because he wants to be a friend, and it just makes my heart happy. I'm going, that's something Superman would do. Oh, that episode just makes me so happy because it's classic Superman action and writing and just charming, and it just oozes cheese, and that's sometimes a good thing. And then lastly, the finale. I know I'm jumping way far ahead, but man, I was worried about the shortened 4th and final season, but when the finale hits, yeah, things kind of get resolved pretty quickly in the first half of it, but I was not expecting the waterworks in the second half of this. So again, spoiler alert here, when they said the 4th season of Death of Superman was going to be the main arc that they're going for, I was like, okay, cool. We're going to get the death and return of Superman. I didn't expect death, return, and death again of Superman. They basically spelled it out for you. Yeah, death of Superman, but a human death. The fact that he gets to live the rest of his life with his wife, gets to die a human, gets to live his life slowly but surely as a regular person. The story gets closure. Superman as a character so rarely ever gets closure. He's a comic book character. He always has to continue on somehow. It's why I think some of the best Superman stories, specifically All-Star Superman, are ones that have a definitive end. He so rarely ever gets that, and he gets a happy ending. It is the death of Superman, but it's a good death. It's a human death. He is not this all-powerful godly being. Sometimes he is, depending on the story, but he's also human, and he's allowed to rest and have a good life. And I was so impressed that Superman and Lois took that very ballsy direction to definitively kill off Superman and definitively give him the happy ending. There's no like leaving the door open for a sequel series or a spinoff. They straight up give him a goodbye, and I think that's super cool. Which leads us to our final segment of this retrospective, my favorite moments from Superman and Lois across all 4 seasons. Like I've already said, to death at this point, but the opening of Superman and Lois is one of my favorite montages, exposition scenes, whatever you want to call it, ever. Whether that is movies or TV, it cuts straight to the heart of what makes Superman so special for so many people. I constantly have a smile on my face whenever I see that clip. And also, we don't talk nearly enough about how good Superman and Lois looks, like the cinematography, the color grading. It just looks chef's kiss. Sunsets and sunrises look different on Superman and Lois. It's fantastic. I love when Lois interviews Superman for the first time in episode 11. Like I mentioned, there's just this charm to both Clark and Superman. Clark is allowed to be a dorky character, and that smile, that's a classic Superman good guy smile and a charisma that I have missed from the character for a long time. And in pure just comic book awesomeness, I like the season 2 finale when Superman needs an extra little boost and basically gets thrown into the sun, and he comes back super ultra mode. And as he's flying back to Earth to save the day, he passes by all the supporting cast and they refer to him as they know him. So he flies past his sons and they go, Dad. He flies past Lois, Clark. He flies past the people of Smallville, Superman. It's basically what the show is. It's how he relates and interacts with all these people in his life and the impact that he makes. Then he's got this great shot where he flies up into the space, the stereotypical Superman shot, turns to the camera, and because he's powered by the sun and super powered, his S emblem is just radiating energy, and that is such cool shot. I also love, most of the time, that Superman does the action, but every once in a while, Clark gets in on the action, and when he does, it is incredibly memorable. Case in point, there's one episode where Lois and one of his kids gets threatened. So he's about to go and confront this guy, and Lois is like, no, we don't need to get Superman involved in this. And he's like, don't worry, he won't be. And I'm like, oh no, you didn't piss off Superman. You pissed off Clark. That's worse, actually. And it's this great, like, confrontation of going, you don't get to threaten my family. And seeing, like, the normally reserved and calm and mild-mannered Clark Kent just take no BS and stand up. I love the good adage of, like, demons flee when good men go to war. Like that, what happens when you push a good man a little bit too far? And he does it not into Superman's suit, as Clark just absolutely whoops this guy that, was a horrible scumbag. Then we get to the 4th and final season. We circle back to that same spot in season 4, and this guy is coming after Clark, and he's convinced that Clark is Superman. And normally, I'm very much against Clark revealing his identity to the world. I think secret identities in comic books should mean something. So when Clark reveals his identity to everyone in that diner, and by proxy, everyone in Smallville and everyone in the world, that he is Superman, I was a little apprehensive, but the scene is so well done. There's this little bit of guilt in Tyler Hoechlin's face going, I feel bad that I've kept this secret for so long. I feel anxious that I'm letting go of this secret. I don't know how my life is going to change. I don't know how my family's life is going to change. But he's revealing his identity to protect those around him. It's a rock and a hard place. It is the unwinnable situation for the hero that we all really want to know what happens when a hero is put in. And Superman and Lois ask the question, what happens in that scenario? And Superman's willing to risk it all to protect people. And then to close out my favorite moments, I love that the opening of the show is a monologue from Clark talking about how he crash landed to Earth, how he grew up with the Kents, how he met a wonderful woman, had 2 kids, and basically became Superman. It was a monologue setting up the origin of Superman. And I love that the show ends with a monologue of Clark narrating his death, of talking about what happens after. The happiness, the joy, the forgiveness that comes with finding peace. It was such a beautiful bookend of this, how the series starts with the origin of Superman, and the bookend of the finale of this is how Superman's story ends in this universe. He's allowed peace. He's allowed rest, something that so rarely happens in comic books, where the story has to keep going. You got to keep telling what's happening next. What's the next big adventure? This version of Superman was allowed to be with Lois forever, and I think it's so beautifully done. I cannot sing this show's praises enough. This to me is the definitive Superman story. I love what Tyler Hoechlin brought to the table. I love what Elizabeth Tulloch brought to the table as Lois. I just enjoy this show so much as a Superman fan. It was so rewarding. I wish we could have gotten more, but I understand why we didn't, and I'm thankful for the little bit that we got to spend. And as a Superman fan, now that this is behind us, I just look forward to the future and hope that James Gunn's Superman knocks it out of the park, but it's got a very high bar it's got to live up to. Well, what do you guys think? Have you seen Superman and Lois? Were you a big fan of the show? Have you not checked it out yet? In which case, I've spoiled all of it for you. Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below. It's like hearing from you guys. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, movie guys and gals. Hey, movie fans. I've often talked about The Dark Knight and how it's not only one of my favorite movies of all time, but one of the most impactful to the comic book movie genre. However, while The Dark Knight rightfully still gets all the love and attention nowadays, its predecessor doesn't get talked about nearly as much anymore, which is a shame because I think Batman Begins is a masterclass in the genre and an unsung hero in the comic book movie world landscape. So, in honor of the film's 20th anniversary, oh god, that sentence makes me feel old, let's take a look back at the 2005 classic, Batman Begins. Before we go into the movie itself, I think it's important to give some context as to what the state of Batman as a franchise was at the time. After the critical and financial disaster that was 1997's Batman and Robin, Warner Bros. Was weighing its options for the future of the Caped Crusader. At one point, Batman Forever and Batman and Robin director Joel Schumacher was reportedly set to return for another Batman movie. However, taking feedback about the comedic tone and cartoonish style of Batman and Robin, Schumacher would have returned the series back to its darker roots. Allegedly, the movie would have seen Nicolas Cage play Jonathan Crane, aka the Scarecrow, as the primary antagonist. The movie would have had Batman thrown in Arkham Asylum and dealing with Scarecrow's fear toxin, and would have seen the return of all the previous movie's villains, including Danny DeVito's Penguin, and the big one, Jack Nicholson, returning as the Joker. Ultimately, Warner Bros. Thought the series needed a complete refresh, so that project would eventually stall out. Fast forward to the year 2000, and Requiem for a Dream director Darren Aronofsky is hired by Warner Bros. To direct a live-action adaptation of the iconic Batman comic, Batman Year One. Aronofsky even got the original writer of that comic, Frank Miller, to pen the script for the project. The movie was set to be a hard R-rated version of the comic that would have seen a dark and gritty take on how Bruce Wayne became Batman. Aronofsky was looking to cast Joaquin Phoenix for the role of Bruce Wayne, but eventually Aronofsky and Warner Bros. Couldn't see eye to eye on the project, and that version of the story fell by the wayside. Still interested in doing a version of the Year One story, Warner Bros. Would get a call from one of their young, up-and-coming directors expressing interest in the project. The name? Christopher Nolan. Around this time, Christopher Nolan was an up-and-coming director with only 3 feature-length directing credits to his name at this point, with the most recent being his first movie for Warner Bros., Insomnia. Insomnia proved to be a modest hit for Nolan as the film had a production budget of $46 million and ended up making $114 million worldwide, while also garnering critical acclaim for its 2 lead actors, Al Pacino and Robin Williams. Despite his lack of experience with big-budgeted productions, Christopher Nolan might have actually always been the perfect candidate to direct a Batman movie, even going so far back as his first movie. Nolan's first full-length movie was a title from 1998 called Following, which sees a lonely man, played by Jeremy Theobald, following a different person each day, only to one day end up following a thief. The thief, a man named Cobb, the same name as Leonardo DiCaprio's Thief character in Inception, shows the man how to break into places, and the story only gets twistier and more Nolan-y from there. But, in a truly eerie bit of career foreshadowing, one of the first places Cobb and the stranger break into is an apartment with a very noticeable sticker on the door. A very noticeable Batman logo. A whole 7 years before Batman Begins. Nolan has openly talked about his love and appreciation for Batman as a character, but by his own admission, he acknowledges he wasn't the biggest comic book nerd. Enter the film's co-writer, David S. Goyer. Knowing he didn't know the comics as well as others, Nolan went to writer David S. Goyer to help pen the script. Goyer already had some superhero credits to his name, having already written the Wesley Snipes Blade trilogy, as well as the Crow City of Angels, but
the less said about that one, the better. And following his work on the Dark Knight trilogy, Goyer would go on to write Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman Dawn of Justice, and Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance.
Oh no!
But Goyer and Nolan both wanted to explore the origin of Batman and not just the night in the alley with his parents. They wanted a Batman story that showed the events in between and leading up to the creation of the Batman persona. Christopher Nolan has expressed in interviews that one of his biggest inspirations for Batman Begins was Richard Donner's Superman. He was hoping to do a well-rounded origin for the character that could reintroduce them to a modern audience. He wanted to follow this character in their early stages and get the audience invested in the man before the hero, for audiences to spend time with and care about Bruce Wayne long before he ever puts on the cape and cowl. To do that, just like how Donner's Superman needed Reeve as the perfect Clark Kent and Superman, the film would need to find the perfect actor for both Bruce Wayne and Batman. Christian Bale was actually the first name Christopher Nolan approached to play Batman, sensing that Bale would excel in the dual role. The big hang-up at the time, however, was Christian Bale's weight and figure. While under consideration for the part of Batman, Bale was about to start filming his role for the movie The Machinist, a role that saw the actor slim down to a dangerously small 110 pounds. But wanting to portray Bruce Wayne, Bale worked hard to put the weight back, going so far as to overcorrect and showing up to production weighing in at around 220 pounds. But once that was all figured out, it was full steam ahead with Bale donning the cape and cowl as Batman. Bale was an inspired bit of casting as he brings the intensity needed for Batman, but also the humanity needed for Bruce Wayne. There's an obvious comparison to be made between Bale's performance in the Batman movies and his role as Patrick Bateman in 2000's American Psycho. Both see the actor playing a rich aristocrat character that hides their truer, darker persona from the world in a physically demanding role. But at the same time, I think that comparison might undercut just how good and nuanced his portrayal in Batman Begins truly is. Patrick Bateman is just an absolutely insane man on the brink, if not already gone insane before we even meet him. Despite how some viewers may see him, Patrick Bateman isn't meant to be a cool, relatable, or sympathetic character. It's an extremely entertaining and engaging performance, but one that's supposed to alienate the character from the audience. Bruce Wayne, on the other hand, needs to have the audience behind him and get people to be invested in him and his dual identities. It's a lot tougher to get an audience to love you than it is to get an audience to hate you, and that's where Bale really shines. He does such a good job of playing this character that you fully believe would become Batman, but is never so emotionally distant or cold that you can't still sympathize or connect with him. I think at times as comic book fans, it's so easy to focus on the cool factor of Batman, and believe me, I'm guilty of it as well, that we overlook how human he is at the end of the day. Some of my favorite moments of the Christian Bale tenure as Batman are Bruce Wayne moments, like the "why do we fall" moment. I applaud the fact that in Batman Begins, we don't even get to see Bruce suited as Batman until halfway through the movie because we've been building up Bruce Wayne so much. But when Batman does finally make his grand entrance, holy crap, it's glorious. For me personally, this is my favorite I'm Batman scene in live action. Sure, the Keaton one is cool too, but I didn't grow up with that version as much, and Bale just has the menace and intimidation I expect from Batman. I know Bale's Batman voice has become a meme at this point, but in Begins, the voice isn't quite as exaggerated as it will be later on, especially in The Dark Knight Rises, so it works for me. My all-time favorite Batman will always be Kevin Conroy. That man was just perfect. But as far as live-action versions go, Bale is currently my favorite. I say currently because I think the potential is there for Pattinson to someday take that mantle, but as it stands right now, he only has one movie to compare against, so put a pin in him as the best Batman for later discussion. And sure, there's elements of other Batman actors that I really like. I liked Keaton, and I think if given better writing, Affleck could have been a generational Batman portrayal, but as it stands, he's the best looking Bat with arguably the best fight choreography of any Batman movie, including Begins. If I did have any critiques of Bale's Batman portrayal, it's that I wish the combat was a little better.
The fight scenes, while fine, are a bit clunky, and I imagine that's more of a result of the suit than anything else. You could also make the same case for Keaton's Batman and his more limited mobility. I guess when you have a really cool suit, it just means you can't move as well. Which brings up the Batman Begins suit itself. I absolutely adore this suit. Costume designer Lindy Hemming absolutely knocked it out of the park. I actually prefer this version of the Batsuit much more than the version we would get in The Dark Knight and The Dark Knight Rises. I get the new suit was made for mobility and convenience, but man, does that Begin suit just look better on screen in my eyes. It just works better for those scenes when Batman has to hide in the shadows or pick off goons in the dark, just like the Arkham games. A whole 4 years before Arkham Asylum! I love the sense of dread and fear that this version of Batman is able to convey thanks to Bale's performance in the suit. It's an infamously difficult task to find someone who can accurately portray both Bruce Wayne and Batman, and I think Bale absolutely nails it. But any leading actor in a movie is only as good as the supporting cast around them, and Batman Begins again excels in this department. Once again taking inspiration from Donner's Superman, Christopher Nolan has stated that he wanted to flesh out the rest of the cast with highly esteemed and respected actors who could further legitimize the material, similar to Gene Hackman and Marlon Brando's casting in Superman. To that end, I'd argue Nolan assembled one of the most stacked casts in any comic book movie. Firstly, he made the fantastic call to cast two-time Academy Award winner Michael Caine as Alfred Pennyworth. I'd argue that in all the various live-action versions of Alfred we've gotten, we've never had a bad miscast. All have been stellar in their own ways, but for me, Michael Caine was the perfect Alfred. He was the perfect blend of the dry wit of Alfred from Batman the Animated Series and the surrogate father figure role that Alfred always is in the comics. The relationship between Alfred and Bruce here feels like an actual partnership, not just one guy working for another, as sometimes is the case in Batman media. Alfred is a vital piece of Batman's crusade here, and I love the emphasis the movie puts on his and Bruce's relationship, and I really chalk that up to the amazing chemistry between Bale and Caine. Then you get Morgan Freeman as Lucius Fox, which, I'll be honest, this movie was actually my introduction to Lucius Fox as a character. I wasn't really aware of the character before seeing Batman Begins, so now when I do read the character in the comics or see him in other animated stuff, I just picture Morgan Freeman. It's clear Christopher Nolan always wanted to direct a James Bond movie because Lucius basically acts as the trilogy's version of Q from MI6, the dude with the gadgets. But Freeman, because he's Morgan Freeman, turns what could be a throwaway character into a really fun and engaging supporting character among Batman's allies. Normally, I don't love overly explained superhero stuff, but I absolutely love seeing Fox walk through all the gadgets and tech with Bruce. With Freeman as the guide, walking through the foundational elements of Batman just becomes that much cooler. Like, heck yeah, show me all the cool hidden stuff in this secret underground off-the-books vault. Now, the bit of casting I've seen cause some debate online is Katie Holmes as Rachel Dawes. I see a lot of people preferring Maggie Gyllenhaal's portrayal as Rachel in The Dark Knight and putting down Holmes' version of the character. For me personally, I actually like Katie more in the role. She's never been an actress that I've had strong feelings towards one way or the other, but for Batman Begins, I thought she fit the role well. I thought her and Bale had better chemistry than Bale and Gyllenhaal, and I bought that these two individuals were actually childhood friends. There's a palpable bond and connection between these two, and she was a solid enough character. Will I argue that she's a great character? Definitely not, but not the worst either. On the flip side, and absolutely not the worst, the best in fact, is Gary Oldman as Detective, not Commissioner, Gordon. I love that a few times in Batman Begins, you get a well-established actor and basically play them against type. The first of these is Oldman's portrayal as Gordon. For most of his career up until this point, Oldman played bad guys, characters like Lee Harvey Oswald in JFK, Stansfield in Leon the Professional, Dracula in Francis Ford Coppola's Dracula, and of course, Ivan in the all-American classic Air Force One. This time around though, he's playing the straight as an arrow good guy, and it's a refreshing change of pace that he's really good at. Maybe it's because he already got some training as the good guy in a Warner Brothers movie because Harry Potter and Prisoner of Azkaban came out just a year earlier in 2004,
And that's a movie that plays him both as the bad guy and the good guy. But Oldman's Gordon, like Kane's Alfred, is one of my absolute favorites, and he feels ripped right out of the comics. He looks exactly like Gordon in Batman Year One, the comic that this movie takes its heaviest inspiration from. He portrays world weariness, yet optimistic so well, and it's easy to root for him as the moral sanity in an increasingly insane Gotham. The other playing against type casting is Liam Neeson as Henry Ducard / Ra's al Ghul. Up to this point, Neeson was often cast as the good guy, the everyman, the father figure type. Roles like Oscar Schindler in Schindler's List, Valjean in Les Mis, Qui-Gon in Star Wars, and even later on in this very year of 2005 with Chronicles of Narnia, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe as the majestic Aslan. But Batman Begins uses that audience expectation of Liam as the good guy to deliver a great villain twist. Because for the first half of this movie, he is playing his usual type of character, this mentor figure that takes someone under their wing, only to pull the rug out from under you and have him be revealed as Ra's al Ghul. I remember watching Batman Begins for the first time and being absolutely shocked at that reveal, going, Liam Neeson is playing a bad guy? But they do it so effectively, and full credit to Neeson's performance, that it wasn't a huge logic leap to get to that point. He came across like a natural villain, granted one that's not very similar to the comic book Ra's al Ghul, but one that was perfect for the story that they were telling. If there is one casting in Batman Begins that could almost be counted as a steal, speaking in sports terms, it would be Cillian Murphy as Jonathan Crane, aka Scarecrow. Up till this point, Murphy had starred in Danny Boyle's 28 Days Later, but wasn't the household name that he is today thanks to Oppenheimer. He was just an up-and-coming that actually didn't originally try out for Scarecrow, but Bruce Wayne instead. Similar to how Tom Hiddleston auditioned for Thor before being cast as Loki, Cillian Murphy auditioned for Batman, even donning the Batman Forever suit, before Nolan made the smart move to have Murphy play the villainous Scarecrow instead. Clearly, Nolan saw the potential in Murphy, as he would cast him for several more movies of his, including Inception, Dunkirk, and of course, Oppenheimer. Cillian Murphy's Scarecrow is also the only villain to return in all 3 movies in the Dark Knight trilogy in some capacity, so clearly Nolan liked working with him. Batman Begins also starts Nolan's trend of reusing actors he likes working with on multiple occasions. Michael Caine was in 8 Christopher Nolan movies before his retirement, Cillian Murphy has been in 6 Nolan films, and Christian Bale was in 4. And Nolan has even had cameos for people from earlier in his career. Remember his first feature film, Following, with the Batman sticker on the door? Well, Jeremy Theobald, the lead actor of that movie, can be seen in a cameo in the Batman Begins climax. And one last thing casting-wise before we move on. Hi, Joffrey from Game of Thrones. We've talked enough about the brilliance of Batman Begins' casting, now let's talk about the brilliance of its story. Batman Begins, as the name implies, is an origin story for Batman and the world he inhabits. Taking heavy inspiration from Batman Year One written by Frank Miller, the movie works because it tells a clear and concise story about what makes Bruce Wayne Batman, while not simply rehashing old elements from previous movies. Sure, there's some stuff that are basically prerequisites for a Batman movie, like the death of the Waynes and Crime Alley, but the movie tries new and fresh ways to tell the story, like adding in characters that weren't originally in the comic, like Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul. Both villains in retrospect were odd choices for Nolan to go with for an origin movie. Odd because Christopher Nolan movies, especially with the Dark Knight trilogy, are movies very much grounded in reality, and Scarecrow and Ra's al Ghul are both characters that are a bit more fanciful. Scarecrow has hallucinogenic gases that causes its victims to have otherworldly visions of their greatest fears come to life. And Ra's al Ghul in the comics is an ancient being that has been kept alive for centuries due to the magical healing properties of the Lazarus Pit, essentially coming back time and time again, being reborn. Both of these characters, on paper, shouldn't work for a realistic Batman movie, but they really, really do because they lay the foundation for what the whole trilogy will be about. Scarecrow represents the fear element and Bruce's need to conquer his own fear while learning to harness fear for his own advantage. Batman Begins is all about fear and failing and getting back up in the face of said fear. It comes back to the line from Thomas Wayne that Alfred repeats later. Why do we fall? So we can learn to pick ourselves up. It's this embracing of fear that allows Bruce to fully become Batman and help Gotham pick itself back up. It's a theme that comes up and comes full circle in The Dark Knight Rises when Bruce has to embrace the fear again after losing to Bane. That's a whole other discussion for another day, but Nolan's use of fear throughout the trilogy takes root early on here, and I think it's done beautifully. Ra's al Ghul, on the other hand, is an interesting character for this story, and one that I'm only just now fully appreciating while writing the script for this video. Like I said, in the comics, Ra's is able to live longer than any mortal human should due to a magical pool, essentially. He carries on for generation after generation because of the Lazarus Pit. Here, there's no Lazarus Pit, at least to our knowing, but Ra's still finds ways to live on. At the beginning, he tries passing off one of his henchmen as Ra's to Bruce, only for us to discover he is the real Ra's later. He continues to stress the idea to Bruce that in order to succeed, one must make themselves more than just a man. You must devote yourself to an ideal, and in the process, make yourself a symbol, a legend, something that lasts for generations and generations. While he may not have a Lazarus Pit, I love the idea of having Ra's al Ghul essentially teach Batman how to live forever, how to become a symbol. Bruce says on his way back to Gotham after training with Ra's, "As a man, I'm flesh and bone, I can be ignored, I can be destroyed. But as a symbol, I can be incorruptible, I can be everlasting." It means that Batman is more than just Bruce Wayne. It's a symbol meant to be carried on forever that can never be destroyed. It's something we see come back around once Nolan makes The Dark Knight Rises and the Batman baton is passed down to John Blake, because Batman will always be more than just one man. So while Scarecrow and Ra's seem like out of left field choices for villains in a Batman origin movie, they ended up being the perfect representations of the themes of the trilogy and what make Batman so special. A character that conquered his fear and trauma, used it to help others, and created a legacy long after he's gone. So all these years later, what is the legacy of Batman Begins? Naturally, when discussions about the Dark Knight trilogy come up, most of it focuses on the Dark Knight, and to a lesser extent, the Dark Knight Rises, with Begins seemingly getting overshadowed. And not to take anything away from those other movies, the Dark Knight especially, I feel like Batman Begins is underrated in just how important it was for the genre. Begins was the CPR to Batman that the franchise so desperately needed following the failings of Batman and Robin. It breathed new life into a series that had theatrical roots as far back as the 60s, yet felt as contemporary and modern as any other superhero movie at the time. One could even argue that this, as well as 2002's Spider-Man, became the modern superhero origin movie template that's still being followed to this day. Christopher Nolan took the superhero origin method from Richard Donner's Superman and put it in the 21st century, layering it in gritty realism. People point at The Dark Knight for turning the superhero genre into a more serious and grounded one, but the foundations of that really start with Batman Begins. So a lot of the more gritty and realistic superhero movies that have become the norm owe at least part of their success to Batman Begins. It was such a successful formula that over the last 20 years of comic book movie adaptations, heck, movie adaptations in general, have tried to replicate it to varying degrees of success. It's only recently that it looks like we may finally be moving past that era into one of campiness and more lighthearted fun again, something that was out of style when Batman Begins first debuted. What's old is new again and all that. All that to say, despite grossing over $370 million worldwide and being the opening chapter in one of the biggest movie trilogies of all time, I still can't help but think Batman Begins is a little underappreciated. It has an incredibly stellar cast, told a fantastic origin story, became a modern template for the superhero genre, and got the Batman franchise back to a respectable place. I would still say The Dark Knight is the better movie, arguably my favorite movie of all time, but Begins is more rewatchable to me. I could put that on whenever and never get sick of it, from its many great and iconic moments to the incredible score by Hans Zimmer, all the way to that fantastic end stinger teasing the arrival of the Joker. Batman Begins is a superhero classic I still love revisiting 20 years later. Hey movie fans, we're just a mere few days away from James Gunn's Superman finally hitting the big screen, and I could not be more excited. It feels like I've been waiting for this movie forever now, and it is finally almost here. So to celebrate that film's release and to build up hype and anticipation, let's instead look back at the previous live-action Superman movies today as I rank the live-action Superman movies from worst to best. Now, my big caveat for this video is that Superman has to be the main character for this movie. It could be a team-up movie, as we'll obviously discuss, but things like Zack Snyder's Justice League or Justice League, both of those are going to be thrown out because he's more or less a supporting character. Now, without further ado, and before we get into all of it, I want to know your ranking. What's your favorite Superman movie of all time? Which one do you think is a little underrated? What's the worst one? Let's kick us off at number 7, the worst Superman movie of all time, Superman 3. Oh boy. So I gotta be honest, when I was going through some of these old Superman movies to get ready for the new one, I hadn't seen Superman's 3 and 4 because of how infamously bad they allegedly are. So I went in with low expectations, and holy crap, 3 was still worse than I was expecting. 3 is up there for one of the worst comic book movies I have ever seen. It is not a superhero movie. It is a Richard Pryor movie that happens to cameo Superman in it. There's a straight up scene where Richard Pryor is narrating a Superman action scene, and instead of us seeing Superman fight and save the day, we just get Richard Pryor telling us about it to a not quite Lex Luthor because Gene Hackman couldn't be bothered to come back. Well, it's a whole complicated thing. However, there are still some things in Superman 3 that I actually like. I kind of like this movie franchise's version of Lana more so than I like Lois. I am not the biggest fan of Margot Kidder's Lois. I actually really like Annette O'Toole's Lana, and maybe that's because I have a Smallville background first going into this movie, so I'm like, oh, it's nice to see you again. But I actually really like the Smallville segments in Superman 3, as few as they are. I like the Clark stuff. Clark in Smallville will always get to my heart, and it's one of my favorite things. But the rest of this movie is just, it's bad. It's bad. Superman fights this robot lady, but it's not a Brainiac type character because they didn't want to get too into the weeds with comic book material, which was a choice, I think. The visual effects are bad. The only good thing is the Smallville stuff and Christopher Reeve continuing to give 100% despite the material that he's working with. He is absolutely playing second fiddle to Richard Pryor. I can see what they're going for, but boy, did it not really land in its execution, if you know what I mean. Next up at number 6 is the one that I assume most people have as their worst Superman movie, also their worst comic book movie of all time, but I'm a little more forgiving of Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. I also went into this one, like Superman 3, having never seen it before, but having heard the legends about how bad Superman 4: The Quest for Peace was. And honestly, I kind of walked away not hating it to the level that I thought I would. First and foremost, I put this much higher than Superman 3 because as bad as this movie gets, it still remembers to be a Superman story first. Superman is the main character. The writing is wonky and 80s as all get out, but Superman is the main character this time around. He is not playing second fiddle to Richard Pryor. For the most part, the cast comes back. You get Margot Kidder back. You get Gene Hackman back. Not saying they're my favorite versions of those respective characters, but it felt better to see them returning. I'm going, okay, this feels much more normal. Granted, there's some other characters in this that are quite obnoxious, but the movie all comes down to Nuclear Man as the main villain for this, which is a being created out of Superman's hair and nuclear weapons that has the voice of Lex Luthor. Oh boy. This dude has like really sharp fingernails. That's his whole thing. The fighting is bad, the flying is bad, but I also kind of cut this movie some slack because it had its budget like slashed right before they were filming this, so maybe I kind of went into it with more of a forgiving mood. Something about Superman 4, it is not a good movie, but if I had to choose between Superman 3 and Superman 4: The Quest for Peace, I'm picking Superman 4: The Quest for Peace any day of the week, because at least Superman's allowed to be Superman. Christopher Reeve is still putting in a great performance, and there's some interesting stuff in it.
Honestly, one of my favorite scenes in the entire Christopher Reeve run as Superman is in The Quest for Peace, which is at the beginning when someone's coming to him saying you should really be selling the farm to like a mall or retail or whatnot because the Kent farm is up for sale, and he really wants to sell it to a fellow farmer. He wants to continue that old school mentality. He doesn't cave into the new modern technology that's around the corner. But it was also a beautiful send-off to Smallville and kind of that era of the Christopher Reeve movies, whether they intended it to be or not. It was a nice tip of the cap, and I actually really love that scene a lot. At number 5 is easily the movie that frustrates me the most by a wide margin, Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice. Oh man, I remember this opening night. I was so excited for this movie, and I was adamantly defending this movie for weeks leading up to its release. I remember people getting all up in arms about that trailer that they said showed too much. I was like, no, I don't think they showed too much. I think they're showing just the right amount, and I have faith that they have one or two big surprises that they're holding out on. No, that trailer showed up everything that we probably shouldn't have seen. That trailer did so much damage, but not as much damage as, the movie itself would do. Going forward, I only watched the Ultimate Edition because that's supposedly like the superior version, and I do think the 3-hour cut of Batman vs Superman is the better version. That being said, better doesn't make it good. It's just better than bad. This is still one of the most frustrating movies I have ever seen because, as I'll talk about later, I actually really loved its predecessor, flaws and all. It's not a perfect movie, but Batman vs Superman, I was going, okay, we've got some good momentum. I like where we're going. Oh no, what are we doing? We're going off the tracks. I don't like where this is. Oh, and Superman's dead. And now I'm sad. Like, there's so many story decisions and creative decisions that I just scratched my head about. Like, why? We kill off Superman in his second movie. The world hates him, and he kind of hates the world. Like, this movie, I get that Zack Snyder was trying to make it the Empire Strikes Back of his trilogy with Man of Steel, this, and then his Justice League. But this movie feels unnaturally cruel to every main character in this. Like, it beats down Batman as a character. It really beats down Superman. Like, it basically kicks Superman down and spits in his face while he's down. Like, it is so cruel to the character and mean-spirited. Like, I don't feel optimistic coming out of it that, yeah, Superman would die for this world. Like, he dies at the end of Batman vs Superman because it feels like he has nothing left in his life. I don't like that for Superman. As the Nightwing fan that I am still pissed to this day that the dead Robin that we see in the Batcave was confirmed to be Dick Grayson. Not Jason Todd, not Tim, not Damian. It was Dick Grayson. That pisses me off to no end, among many other things. I have tried to rewatch this movie and forgive it, and it still frustrates me to this day. I don't hate it nearly as much as I did that first viewing, but I will never like Batman vs Superman. From here on out, we enter Superman movies that I will at least watch if they're on, with number 4 being Superman Returns. So I remember watching this as a kid and thinking, it was okay, but a little boring. And I was actually really excited to revisit Superman Returns as I was rewatching all these Superman movies for the new one. I'm like, all right, Superman Returns. I feel like a lot of people consider this to be a hidden gem. Brandon Routh's a great Superman that's underappreciated and overlooked. I rewatched Superman Returns. But it's not great, guys. I wanted to like it. I really wanted to like it. And I think the first 30 to 40 minutes are really good to get some classic Superman stuff. You get him rescuing Air Force One, which is a lot of fun. But the rest of the movie is so boring. I don't like Kevin Spacey's Gene Hackman, which is a recurring trend that I still to this day don't like any Lex Luthor we've gotten in the movie so far. I don't like Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor. I don't like Kevin Spacey's Lex Luthor. I don't like Jesse Eisenberg's Lex Luthor, especially. Brandon Routh is good for the material he's given as Superman, but the portrayal is a little iffy. He's essentially a deadbeat dad. Like, he got Lois pregnant and then bailed to see if Krypton was still a thing. And then when he comes back to Earth, finds out he has a kid. He's like, man, that's weird. Good luck with that. I'm always around if you need me, but probably not for that. You got James Marsden for that. Like, Superman is not necessarily a good character. Brandon Routh he's good at trying to be Christopher Reeve, but he wasn't given good writing
to work with for this. Not a good villain. It's just a boring movie. I would hope with 2006, like, we had better special effects, which we did, which would lead to more exciting action set pieces, which we will get later on. But Superman Returns, I really wanted that to be a diamond in the rough and be like, oh wow, this was underrated. No, I think this movie's properly rated, and it's somewhere in the middle all around, if you know what I mean. Next up at number 3 is going to be a bit of a controversial one, because I know a lot of people have this as their number 1, but for me, my number 3 is Superman the movie, the original one. I like this movie, but boy, is it a little bit of a slog to get through. I know, it is a classic, and I respect its place in history, but it is paced so methodically, and I get that it was done intentionally, but it has some weird pacing stuff. Like, we spend so much time on Krypton, or as Marlon Brando calls it, Krypton, which that still bothers me to this day. We spend so much time there, and then so little time in Smallville. I'm just like, can we swap that amount of time? Like, not spend as much time on Krypton and spend a lot more time in Smallville? Because across the Christopher Reeve movies, when we are in Smallville, I think that's when the movies are at their best. Christopher Reeve is legendary casting at this point. He is perfect, and he's great in all of his movies. But the big issue with Superman the movie is he doesn't really have a threat. You have Gene Hackman's Lex Luthor, who is just there to acquire real estate. He's acquiring Nevada so he can sink California. Like, that's not an interesting plan. I understand and respect Superman the movie's place in history, but it's just not my favorite Superman. I think there's a lot of good potential there, and I like the stuff with Superman. It's everything else that has always kind of been the issue with that era of Superman, I think. Which leads us to my number 2, which is Superman 2, and I'm going with the Donner cut, not the theatrical cut when we're talking about Superman 2 here. Superman 2 is what I wanted Superman 1 to be, just ramped up more action, an actual villain this time around. 3 to be, in fact. General Zod and his henchmen / cronies, whatever we want to call them, they are great intimidating foils for Superman, and actually having both a physical and a moral conundrum for Superman to face this time around of actually fighting Zod, but also, do I give up my powers to be with the woman that supposedly loves me? But that's a whole other thing. Do I give up what I am to be with this person? But also, how do I protect the world? That was a good story. There's an actual force for him to go up against. You had the right amount of Lex Luthor, the right amount of General Zod, and Terrence Stamp's Zod is a perfect foil for Christopher Reeve's Superman. I love Zod a lot in this. I think it's just a massive step up from the first Superman movie. This is the one that I would rewatch the most from the Reeve era. It's a perfect balance of the storytelling and methodical pacing of the first one, but much more action that you would get in the comics and even some of the later movies. They knew what they wanted this time around. It's like, okay, we need to ramp up the action and really escalate the characters as well. It's such a superior sequel. I love Superman 2 a lot. That being said, controversially, if you haven't figured it out by now, my number 1 most favorite Superman movie up till this point is Man of Steel. I love Man of Steel. Is it a perfect movie? Absolutely not. We'll get into that in a little bit here, but I have such fond memories associated with this movie. I saw it opening night back when they still did midnight releases. Oh man, I miss midnight releases. They had the midnight release, and we were actually on vacation at the time when we saw this movie. Like, normally my family doesn't see movies like when we're on vacation, just because it's one of those things. If you could see movies when you're at home, and vacation you're supposed to do things that you can't do when you're at home. But I begged and pleaded with my dad of going, please, 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 let me see this movie at midnight. I don't care that we're not going to get back to the hotel until like 3:30 in the morning. I promise I'll get up just fine the next morning. I just need to see this movie. So sure enough, he relented, and he and I saw Man of Steel at midnight in Disneyland's downtown Disney area, and it is still one of my favorite theater going experiences ever. I have such fond memories of watching it with him, and it's just great time because for a while there, Marvel was dominating and DC didn't have good representation. Yeah, we had Green Lantern 2 years before, which I still maintain is not that bad. To have Superman back on the big screen and go, oh, yes. And I love Henry Cavill's Superman. The thing is, though, I like Man of Steel because it is and it isn't a Superman story in my mind. It makes sense why this movie is called Man of Steel. He's not Superman yet. He only gets the moniker of Superman right at the end. I think this is more or less like an origin. This is like a year before year one of Superman, because he only really becomes Superman at the end. But for a foundational piece, I think this really, really works. Yeah, it's got some pacing issues. The whole back half is nothing but an action scene, and all the front half is the character stuff. I like character stuff, though. I like the Smallville scenes. I like seeing him grow up and trying to discover who he is. It's really well done. It reminded me a lot of Superman Birthright, which is a great comic. My other thing is, don't love Kevin Costner as Pa Kent. I thought the casting was perfect, but you know, some of the story directions that they gave him, yeah, it's fine. Just let kids die. It's no big deal. I'm like, that's problematic. That's a nice way of putting it. But for the most part, I liked seeing what Superman would become someday. Like I said, this isn't a full-blown Superman movie. This is the slightly before he's Superman movie. And in that sense, it really worked. I like Henry Cavill. I like Michael Shannon as Zod. I love the suit. I just thoroughly enjoy Man of Steel. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it gave us the intense flying scenes and the intense action scenes that I had always wanted to see from a Superman movie. Now it feels like with James Gunn's Superman, we're gonna get a combination of everything. We're gonna get the storytelling and the character work of the Reeves movies. We're gonna get the big action set pieces that we got from the Snyder ones, and I could not be more excited. I have run the gamut with Superman movies. There's been some great ones, then there's been some questionable ones, but it's always fascinating to see the things of the character that they choose to highlight, because there's so many interesting facets to Superman. But what do you guys think? What's your favorite Superman movie of all time? What's your least favorite? Whatever your thoughts, let me know down in the comments below as I hear from you guys. And as always, if you like what you see and want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, movie guys and gals. Hey, comic book fans. When it comes to the comic book genre, the thing that we kind of talk about the most is either the movies, the TV show, or lately the video games, because Suicide Squad Kills the Justice League is getting all kinds of people hot and bothered. Something we don't talk about nearly enough is the comic books themselves. Without them, there really is no comic book movies or TV shows or video games. So let's kind of put the attention back on them this week. This week, I'm going to give you my top 7 all-time favorite comic books. Before we get into the list, what are your favorite comic books of all time? Let me know down in the comments below. I always like hearing your recommendations. I'm always curious to see new stories. Without further ado, at number 7, we have Flashpoint by Jeff Johns. Now, this one is kind of more commonplace nowadays because the Flash movie, you know, the big financial success at the box office that the Flash movie was. Wah, wah. We are more familiar as an audience with the concept of time travel and multiverses. So Flashpoint is essentially the Flash goes back in time to make sure that his mother doesn't die. It's exactly what they used for the plot of the Flash movie, except this is a lot better and there was, you know, proper build up to it. So Barry basically goes back in time to save his mother, and by doing so will also save his dad, who got the short end of the stick and kind of got blamed for the death of his mom, even though it wasn't his fault. So in doing that, Barry accidentally kind of creates a butterfly effect and creates this whole dystopian future, in which case Batman is completely different, and that Bruce Wayne dies and Thomas Wayne's the actual Batman this time around, and he uses guns and has no problem killing people. It's a cool different approach to a superhero story of just, these are the kind of the characters that you know and love, but done in a drastically different way, except for the Flash. That's still the Flash you know and love. And it's so epic in scale, but still personal in its both consequences and its story of, it's very much a Barry story, even though the world and worlds around him are crumbling, and he's got to make the right choice at the end of, do I make the sacrifice to reset everything back to the way it was? The only downside is I don't know if it's one of those for new readers type of books. I don't know if it's one of those pick up and read type of things. At number 6, we have one of the most famous Batman stories of all time, Batman the Long Halloween by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. This is one of those of like, oh, a Hollywood director is tackling a Batman movie. The first comic he's probably gonna read is Batman the Long Halloween. Christopher Nolan has been very open and on the record of like, oh yeah, I read Batman Year One and Batman the Long Halloween when doing research for Batman Begins. And there's a lot of that in Batman Begins and definitely in The Dark Knight as well. That being said, Nolan could have picked a lot worse source material. These are some of those two in particular, some of the best Batman stories of all time, but I give the edge slightly to Batman the Long Halloween, and an honorable mention to the sequel, Batman Dark Victory, just because it introduces Robin to the universe, and that's always a win in my book, as you are well aware by now. So basically, Batman the Long Halloween is our famous Cape Crusader trying to track down the Holiday Killer, a killer that only kills people on holidays. Wow, what a clever and inventive name!
Do I detect a note of sarcasm? Are you kidding me? This baby is off the charts.
The thing that makes Long Halloween stand out, one, is the beautiful and truly unique art style. This has such an atmosphere. Atmosphere sometimes is hard to capture in a comic book medium, but this has a very specific atmosphere and tone. You pick up a single page of this book and go, oh, this is from the Long Halloween. It is so different and unique visually from anything else Batman wise, and basically since. The only other Batman story that I can think that is so visually unique is probably Batman Arkham Asylum. That also is just out there and visually unique. But I love the story for Long Halloween. Every time you feel like Batman has the leg up and just kind of figuring out what the mystery is, there's another interesting twist and turn to the narrative. So you never fully get the whole picture until right at the end, just like a great mystery. And if there's anything I like just as much as comics, it's a good mystery. That is exactly what the Long Halloween is. At number 5, we have one of the best Superman stories of all time, All-Star Superman by Grant Morrison, also known as the picture that you keep seeing whenever James Gunn posts anything about Superman Legacy. All-Star Superman is special just because it shows all the various different assets to Superman and what makes him such a beloved character. It's essentially a love letter to the character itself. So without giving too much away, the basic premise for All-Star Superman is, via some shenanigans on Earth, Superman only has more or less a year left to live. So what does the all-powerful being that is Superman do with only a year left? What affairs does he have in order? What do the people around? How does he interact with the people around him? What affairs does he need to do to make sure the world is still safe? It is a very touching and emotional story, much more than I was expecting the first time I read All-Star Superman. It's also been converted into a brilliant animated movie adaptation. Really love that one as well. It's just a wonderful Superman story with one of, if not the best endings to a comic book of all time. It's beautiful, it's powerful, it is essentially Superman at his absolute best. At number 4, we have one that I'm not really sure has a name, but the cover of it just says Spider-Man Great Power. So I'm just gonna title it Spider-Man Great Power, I guess. Essentially what this is a collection of a lot of the early Spider-Man comics where he first meets Doc Ock, Kraven the Hunter, Electro, basically the formation of the Sinister Six. Now, I grew up reading a lot of Spider-Man comics, but given that I was born and raised in the 90s, I didn't really read a lot of the 90s comics because, if you didn't know, Spider-Man was going through a bit of a rough patch creatively in the 90s. You might even argue that he hasn't really recovered since then. So I read a lot of the original Stan Lee and Steve Ditko Spider-Mans, and I really could not get enough of them. I was very much the awkward reading kid in the class, so I really resonated with Peter Parker, especially that original dorky Peter Parker. I never rocked the full-on like glasses and sweater, but I could see a lot of myself in the character, and that's the beauty of Spider-Man. We all are supposed to see a little bit of ourselves in Spider-Man. Are these comics dated? Oh, definitely. Some of the dialogue and some of the artwork is very of its time, but I still am incredibly nostalgic for those stories and just how it's very straightforward. There's not as much nuance as there is in the newer comics of stuff, whether it's Marvel or DC, but that's okay. Sometimes I just like a good, straightforward, good guy versus bad guy fight. At number 3, we have my all-time favorite Batman story in Batman Under the Red Hood by Judd Winnick. I love this story, but also it might be one of those of like, you can't really dive into the deep end on this one if this is your first comic ever. There's a lot of backstory and lore that you kind of need to know going into this, but it's such a good story nonetheless. So essentially what this one is Batman encounters a new vigilante to Gotham known as Red Hood, who is doing essentially what Batman's doing, but doing it much more brutally, violently, and killing certain people. And when it's revealed who Red Hood is, it's basically a spit in the face to Batman. The past comes back to haunt him in the best way possible, but it's not just Red Hood as a character, how everyone else in the entire Batman roster is utilized. Nightwing is here, and it's great. You have Nightwing in a story, that's really all I need. But the rest of the narrative around it is so good. At first, it's this mystery of who's Red Hood. Then once you know who Red Hood is, the emotional ramifications for Batman. Then the finale, where it's kind of a triple threat match, but not really. Again, this comic's been out forever, but I don't want to spoil it for people that haven't read it because it's so good. There's another fantastic animated adaptation of this, just like there was for All-Star Superman. At number 2, we have my all-time favorite Superman story, Superman for All Seasons by Jeff Loeb and Tim Sale. Yes, the same guys that did Batman The Long Halloween and Batman Dark Victory, except it is completely opposite of those stories completely. Whereas Long Halloween and Dark Victory were very dark and moody and atmospheric, just like you'd expect from a Batman story, this is overtly bright. It is very bright, very colorful, very different art style from their previous work. This is almost like pastel paintings in comic book form. I love the visual style of Superman for All Seasons. It is unlike anything I've ever seen before in a comic or since. It's got such a unique style, but the story is interesting in and of itself. So where the For All Seasons parts come in is it's essentially Superman's first year on the job in Metropolis, and there's 4 different perspectives on how they view Superman, one representing each season. So say you've got Lex Luthor in the winter, Lois Lane in the summer, Martha Kent in another season, and so on and so forth. And it's so beautiful to see how these characters see and interact with Superman. Do they see him as Clark? Do they see him as the savior of Smallville? Do they see him as a threat to the legacy that is the Luthor name? It's such a fascinating and compelling look at the character of Superman. While not necessarily being an origin, there's enough Smallville in there that I like where they go with it. Another big draw for me with Superman for All Seasons was how they depict Superman. It's not so much like a John Byrne bodybuilder type. It's almost closer to like a Mr. Incredible build of he is a large, almost to a comical level large individual, but not in a muscular way, almost in just a large body figured version of Superman. That extends to when he's both Superman and Clark, but Clark, he's got this interesting big hulking body and slouching stature. It's a very interesting contrast and a very cool deliberate choice. Not to mention, Superman for All Seasons has easily my favorite Superman moment of all time, one that's been replicated in Superman and Lois, in which case he saves a kid from falling off a building, gives him back the hat, kid goes, "Oh, cool costume," to which Superman goes, "Thanks, my mom made it for me."
There you go, friend.
Thanks. Cool costume.
Thanks. My mom made it for me.
It is the most quintessential Superman scene of all time, and no joke, I will cry tears of joy if that is in Superman Legacy or in any of James Gunn's upcoming Superman movies. I need that to happen. But it should come as no shock to anybody. If you've been with this channel for any length of time, you should kind of figure what my number 1 will be. My number 1, Nightwing Year 1 by Chuck Dixon. I love this so much, not just because it's Nightwing.
Are you sure about that?
I don't think just because it's Nightwing. Nightwing Year 1, I'll be perfectly honest, did play a big contributing factor for pitching a Nightwing movie part 1. That first video that I did, I took not all of it, but certain elements from this storyline for my story pitch of how I want a Nightwing movie to work. Just because I think there's a lot of the backbone and the core of who the character of Nightwing is introduced in Nightwing Year 1. The visual style is very unique and different. It very much pops off the page. It's not flat. Everything is very vibrant and larger than life, almost to a cartoon degree. I love how he interacts with Superman. Don't always love how he interacts with Batman in this one, but that's another thing that might be played into in a Nightwing adjacent video. I swear it's coming this year. I swear. I'm working on a script. Nightwing 3 is happening this year. I promise. But Nightwing Year 1 really is just the template for a great Year 1 story. I almost put Robin Year 1 on here, also written by Chuck Dixon, which details Dick Grayson's first year as Robin, but this is his first appearance as Nightwing, and it's so cool to see the ground being laid for my favorite character. The artwork really pops. It's a pretty straightforward story, but one that still really gets the job done. And Chuck Dixon to me is still the best Nightwing writer, and it's not even close. Well, what do you guys think? What are your all-time favorite comics? Is there any big name titles that you think I missed? Whatever your thoughts, let me know it down in the comments below. And as always, if you like what you see and you want to see more, subscribe to the channel. And as always, stay sharp, comic book fans.